Hello, everyone. My name is Miranda, and I will be your Enchantress of Avalon, taking you on a journey into the lands mystical and into Avalon. And for those of you who are new to my channel, I want to thank you for watching. For today's topic, I am going to be focusing on the 6 goddesses who are most associated with the Isle of Avalon and talk a little bit about how to connect with and work with them and work with Avalon. So it's a little bit of a it's a little bit of a continuation of a topic I was talking about on my Twitch stream on Friday, but this I want to focus on specifically the goddesses and a little bit about each of them. And so let's dive in. First of all, I will start with the 5 Welsh Celtic goddesses who are used in several different traditions in working with the Isle of Avalon. There are more than there are many Avalonian traditions of magic and of paganism out there. And 5 goddesses appear quite often, and certainly people like Genital and Drew with the Sisterhood of Avalon use these 5 as the goddesses that they work with. And though they are Rhiannon, Caradwyn, Blodeuwedd, Bronwyn, and Eärnod. They are all very magical and all very powerful Celtic figures. We read about most of them in the Mabinogion, and Caradwyn features strongly also in the Book of Taliesin, as she is connected with Taliesin, who is, of course, the great poet. So, I will start with Caradwyn for talking about her a bit, because if we look at the Sisterhood of Avalon tradition, they break the year up into parts, and we are currently in the Caradwyn part of the year, as we are in the dark part of the year. And Caradwyn is a goddess associated with magic. She is associated with transformations. She is associated with, as I said, the dark half of the year. She's associated with being a crone figure, so, a wise woman figure. Even though in most scholars would say that she probably was only in her 30s, her later 30s, maybe her 40s tops, in how she appears as a goddess. She doesn't appear as like this really wise and old woman, because she is both a crone and a mother figure. And that factors very strongly into the most famous story about her. And that is, of course, the story of the birth of Taliesin. Basically, Taliesin was first born to a mortal woman, and he was a young boy who was named Gion. And he was tasked with helping Caradwyn as she was brewing this important potion that had to be brewed for over months and months. I believe it was a year and a day, as is very common. I think most tellings do say it was a year and a day. Celtic culture has a very important connection with a year and a day, because that day is that time outside of time. I have talked about it before on this channel. I just wanted to mention it. Now, Gion was tasked with stirring this cauldron for Caradwyn as this potion was getting ready to be used. And just before it's ready to be used, it was supposed to be used on her son who was very ugly. So she brewed a potion for him that would give him all the knowledge in the world. This way, at least, people would respect him for his intellect. She couldn't fix the fact that he happened to be born incredibly ugly, but she could give him knowledge, omnipotence, all-knowingness. Omniscience, not omnipotence. I'm sorry, omniscience is all-knowing, not all-powerful. She's giving him knowledge. However, just before it's ready to be used, a bit of the potion that is bubbling in Caradwyn's cauldron splashes onto Gion's fingers, and he sticks them in his mouth to cool them. Natural reaction. Anyone who's stirring anything, if it's, liquid and it splatters on you, you want to stick your fingers in your mouth to cool them off. It's a natural reaction. However, this potion was then affected on Gion, and he gains the knowledge instead of Caradwyn's son. And that meant that the potion had been used. It could not be used again, and she could only brew it once. So she starts chasing him, and there's this, I'm not going to get into it because it is a bit of a long story, but there's this whole chase sequence where they both transform into different things until finally Gion transforms into a stalk of wheat and Caradwyn into a hen, and she eats the wheat. And then 9 months later, she gives birth to a son she never actually recognizes, who eventually is taken in by others and given the name Talesian. And he goes on to be the greatest poet Wales ever knew. The next part of the year will be ruled by Blodeuwedd in the Sisterhood of Avalon tradition, so I'll talk about her next. I've already done an entire video on her, so I'm just gonna talk about her briefly. She is the Welsh Celtic goddess who was made from flowers by the magicians Math and Gideon, and she was then presented as a bride for Lugh Fes, and eventually she would betray him in falling in love with another man, and her and her lover plotted to kill him, and because in some versions they're successful and others they are not. In any way, Lugh is brought back to life. Because of this, her punishment is to be turned into an owl, a bird of prey. It also means that she will never be able to be around, that she will have to sleep during the day and come out at night. And as a woman who is literally made of flowers, the sun is important to her. So it was a punishment. After that, you would go into the period of Rhiannon, for going to the Sisterhood of Avalon tradition. And Rhiannon, again, I've done videos on Rhiannon. Rhiannon is a goddess of sovereignty, and she's associated with horses, particularly the white mare. And in her story, there are multiple stories about her, two that factor into two branches of the Mabinogion. I will just briefly say that her story is one of enduring trial set before you with your head held high and persevering, and that's a lesson that's so important that she teaches us. She was, a fairy queen who was married to a mortal who was then accused of something heinous. She held her head high, eventually got her son returned to her, and was reinstalled where she belonged. It's, again, very truncated version. If you want the full story, please watch my Rhiannon videos or pop over to my blog, whiteroseofavalon.life, and there's plenty of Rhiannon content and content on the other goddesses mentioned as well. The other two that are used in the Sisterhood of Avalon tradition are Bronwyn and Earnod. They are usually invoked during, or meditated on during, specific lunar events, as all Avalonian magic is related to herbcraft and lunar craft. Earnod was the mother of Lugh Fes, and she, again, similar to Caradwyn with Talesian, refused to acknowledge him as her son, and refused to name him, but got tricked into naming him, refused to do other things for him, but got tricked into it. So finally, she told him that he would never have a human bride, never have a living mortal bride, which is why, in order to circumvent this, Math and Gideon had to create him a bride out of flowers. She would therefore not have been born by mortals or born in a natural human way. And she is a goddess associated with the moon. Her name actually means silver wheel. So we have this very lunar, and almost, for those of you who know about Greco-Roman mythology, almost a kind of Artemis Diana vibe, because she did want to be a virgin and was kind of tricked into In some versions of it, she's raped. In some versions, she's tricked into having sons, and that's why she hates her sons. Bronwyn is a very sad tale. She was a Welsh princess who was married off to a terrible, terrible Irishman, and he basically imprisoned her, and she died after having this torturous event. And there was an entire war that happened between her brothers and him in order to try and get her back, and then she ends up dying anyway. It's incredibly tragic. So I do encourage you to read the Mabinogion to get that full story. It is incredibly sad. I don't have a lot of time to talk about it, but she is a symbol of, you know, loss and sorrow, and also, you know, of gaining self-respect. And her name means white raven, actually. And her brother Bronn, his name means raven, so they're connected. And then finally, the most important goddess connected to Avalon, as she is pretty much Avalon in and of itself, is, of course, Morgan Le Fay. She is the leader of a ninefold sisterhood, and they are often referred to as either priestesses or as Morgans in their own right. And we first see her in this light in Geoffrey of Monmouth's Vita Merlini. And then later we get to see her as, you know, the sister of King Arthur, who plots his demise. But in every version, she's still right there to ferry him on that barge, to take him to Avalon, to heal from his wounds, to have him wait there with her until he can be resurrected as the future king, because he is, of course, the once and future king. And that is the story of Avalon most people know. Morgan Le Fay on that barge collecting Arthur after the final battle of Camlan. Bedivere has just pitched the sword Excalibur back into the lake, and it was caught by the Lady of the Lake as she pulled it under. And then Morgan arrives on this barge with two other women, two other queens of Avalon. And this is usually either two other of the 9 Morgans, or it could be, you know, two ladies of the lake, Vivian and Nimue maybe. But she comes with two other women. The three of them put Arthur on the barge and take him to Avalon, where he will await for Albion to need him most. And Albion, of course, is the ancient name of Britain. So, yeah, you can connect to these goddesses by reading their stories. There's no shortage of stories of Morgan Le Fay. There's great texts in the Book of Taliesin and in the Mabinogion. There have been great fiction works based on these. Evangeline Walton did a tetralogy, that's 4 books that are about the 4 branches of the Mabinogion, so you would get to know those goddesses. I highly recommend those books. And again, just meditate on Avalon, meditate on these goddesses, and that's a great way to connect to them. So I hope you've liked this video, learning a little bit about the goddesses of Avalon, and please like, subscribe, and follow. And check out my blog, whiteroseofavalon.life, for more content. Have a great Sunday. See you next week.